Dellenger joins us right now. He writes at Sports Illustrated. You know, Ross, regular guest on the show. And, Ross, we always appreciate a bit of your time. One of the things that is so interesting to me about this Mike Leach story and covering his coaching career and his life on and off the field is that there's not really a manual on how to do this. People die all the time. That's reality. And yet very, very rarely do sitting college football coaches pass away while they are still coaching. And, Ross, I don't know if you've been overwhelmed by this or not, but the number of tributes that have come from players, coaches, media members, just anybody that has had an interaction with Mike Leach has made this a really interesting 48 hours.
Yeah, it sure has. You know, he obviously the outpouring is incredible. I mean, just as strong of an outpouring as I've ever seen for pretty much anyone, let alone, you know, a college coach, but any person that I've ever seen, which probably tells you a lot about the way Mike Leach treated people and the way he went about living his life. And I think it told a lot about him and the outpouring. But you're right, it is a very unusual, somewhat rare circumstance. The last active sitting FBS coach, football coach, you know, to pass was way back in 2006 at Northwestern. Randy, I'm missing
Randy Walker.
his last name. Yeah, Randy Walker died of a heart attack. And then the last SEC coach was Bo Rain, of course, of LSU. It was a couple months into his job at LSU, and when his plane went down, his private aircraft went down and crashed. So I think in between those two, there were a couple. There was a South Carolina coach who passed, and there was one more, I believe. So basically, this is the fifth time it's happened in roughly 50 years. So it's of an FBS coach. So it doesn't happen very often, and there is no manual. And Mississippi State, you know, seems to have been in communication the last couple of days with people around the program, and they've handled it just about as well as you could. I mean, it's obviously a difficult situation.
So, Ross, you said something that stuck out to me a second ago, that this outpouring of support, the outpouring of tributes that have come in, seem to be a testament to the way that Mike Leach treated people. He was certainly not perfect, and he had his moments along the way, but overwhelmingly he seemed to be interested in people that he was talking to, even if they were there to talk to him because of their interest in him. So what about your interaction? You've spent so much time with so many coaches one-on-one. Tell us about your interaction with Mike Leach.
Yeah. I think well, there's a few things that stick out. I was going to say there's one or two, but there's so many. I could go on and on about Mike Leach and stories about Mike Leach. But I'll say, you know, I do spend a lot of time around a lot of coaches, and there's a question I get from a lot of people, and the question is always, who's your favorite coach, or who's your most interesting coach, or what's your best story around a coach, or who's the weirdest coach, whatever, you know. And usually the answer to the question is Mike Leach. And I always tell people there are two coaches that I've ever spent time around who are different from every other coach I've ever known, especially at the major college level, and that's Mike Leach and Dana Holgorsen, who, oddly enough, are both very close to one another, are from the same tree. Those two are just different from other coaches. The way they live their life, their schedules, their interests, they just are different from other coaches. And then one thing that makes Mike different from most major college coaches, and a lot of people in general, is that he really was in every man in every facet. I mean, he in fact he preferred not to talk about football. He wanted to talk about the economy, or grizzly bears, or astrophysics. It was amazing. He could talk about so many different subjects, and he would talk about it with whoever he ran into at the bar or before a game. He just was so different and unique from every other major college coach, and certainly most if not every person I've ever run into in my life. So it's a sad day because college football and America in general, lost someone that was so unique and special. And he, as you said, he's not perfect. None of us are, and there are certainly a lot of his views on things, politically, that a lot of people probably didn't agree with. And there were probably some things where, especially on social media, that maybe stepped out of line here and there and had to be kind of reminded of his position and how important he was, and he can't maybe do this or that. But that's what kind of made him who he was. He kind of lived his life on his own accord. He didn't fall in line.
Ross, it's fascinating to me that you mentioned Dana Holgorsen just a second ago. I referenced him yesterday, and I did a couple of Houston games on television this year. And at one point, I asked him about kind of air raid principles within his offense and whether or not, the way it's changed. And he's like, "Oh no, they threw me out of the air raid club a long time ago." And then he kind of paused. He's like, "The Pirates, the only one that still does it, the real thing." Yeah. He said everybody else has adapted it, but that is, you're spot on in terms of the two of the unique characters in college football. I would like to ask you this: Mississippi State finds itself in a difficult spot, right? I mean, they've got a game day or a bowl game coming up, and clearly Zach Arnett can handle running the football program. But there's an interim athletics director in Bracky Brett. I don't know if Zach Arnett is ready to be a full-time head football coach or not. I don't even know how he would answer that question. But the calendar is such that National Signing Day is a week from Wednesday, a week from tomorrow. It's 8 days away, and even while the grieving process is going on, the world doesn't stop in college football. How do you think they navigate this?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. Like you mentioned that they've got an interim athletic director, and we're supposed to do final interviews tomorrow for the athletic director position with a group of finalists, and obviously that has been delayed, probably delayed into January. So there's that component, and then of course there's the component of head football coach. And you're in a situation like you mentioned, right? You've got the portal that's open, so you're trying to prevent players from entering, and then you've got signing day coming up. You're trying to sign players and keep your class intact. And, Zach Arnett is 36 years old and has never been a head coach, and is now thrust into the interim role in trying to navigate all this. And it's certainly not easy. And I don't know exactly what their plans are as far as the permanent coach and all. But certainly you got to think that Zach Arnett is a candidate for that. I don't know that Mississippi State is going to wait a month or more for a coaching search. If you hire an AD, and let's say the earliest now might be early January, mid-January, you're doing a coaching search in mid to late January is probably not ideal. So you got to wonder what the plan is here. And, it's so soon with Leach's passing that I don't think that's something that will be determined, tonight or even tomorrow or the next day maybe. But but it does have to be somewhat soon because of all the factors we've discussed.
Yeah. There is a lot going on, a lot to juggle right now for Mark Keenum, the president at Mississippi State. Ross, always appreciate your time, appreciate your insight. You do great work, and it's always good to visit with you.